I've been working with Simon for quite a few years on these wonderful little catalysts. Wonderful little things. And we're going to hear a lot of abbreviations, things like ORI, ECS, FTC, the name of the company. So we're going to expose those and we're going to unpack it all and we're going to find out more about the story behind these miracle little pellets, basically, that you put in your fuel tank and the improvements it can make to the average motorist. So what are they? First and foremost, can you tell us what's the magic ingredient in one of these?
All they are is tin and antimony. Sometimes they're made with a bit of bismuth in, sometimes a little bit of inorganic lead, but generally they're just tin and antimony.
Right.
That's it. They're very, very simple.
How can that improve my vehicle?
If you've had a vehicle for a while, it'll get deposits, carbon deposits form very quickly in combustion engines, petrol and diesel. And these will prevent deposits forming, but they'll also remove them from engines where they've built up.
Right, let's just simplify that for the audience. So if you have a fire, you get ash that's left behind.
Yeah.
That's a carbon deposit.
Yeah.
So if you're burning fuel in an engine, once that fuel explodes, most of it gets turned into power, which gets us down the road. But of course, there's a deposit. There's the ash at the end of it, and that stays in the engine. It sticks and clings to the engine. I know, for experience, restoring cars for the last almost 50 years of my life, that when you break an engine open, it's full of soot and carbon deposits, and you need to clean those before you rebuild the engine. You're saying that adding these to the fuel tank remove those carbon deposits?
Completely. So the reason that we make these and produce these and sell these is largely because of the ECS test that was carried out in America by the Philadelphia Coca-Cola Bottling Company on 20 lorries, saw a 77% reduction in emissions and a 24% improvement in economy or restoration in economy. We've got copies of that test. That's why we make them. If they can clean up a dirty lorry, they'll clean up anything.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's a massive figure, isn't it? I mean,
it's huge.
It's huge. It is absolutely huge. And you just touched upon something there that most people who've had these little catalysts in the past have tried to, I think, mistakenly sell them as a way to improve your fuel economy. These magic little bullets you put in your tank and it's going to improve your fuel economy. That's not true. But the truth is about removing the carbon deposits.
Yeah, removal and prevention. That was what the motor industry discovered with these back in the 40s, that they would remove carbon, decoke an engine without even picking up a spanner. So you could literally throw a load into a truck or a car, throw them in the fuel tank, drive the car, drive the truck, and it would just decoke the engine. So the motor industry were apoplectic with rage at this. This is mad. We're going to lose fortunes because cars can be decoked. Motorists can decoke an engine just by chucking these in the fuel tank. So they hated them from that point of view. And obviously, if you put them into a brand new car, no carbon deposits ever, no injector deposits, no valve deposits, no nothing. It just stays completely clean. And it is viewed as preposterous. It's why the snake oil and that's nonsense, they don't work, because it's so stupidly simple. It's the simple things of the world confounding the wise, and people they won't have it. They just won't have it.
Well,
a lot of people won't have it. Anyway.
Which is a bit strange one, isn't it? Because not only do we have a loyal customer base that stick by these little catalysts, but also I've put them in my own vehicles and seen the difference. Plus, I'm inundated with our customers saying that I've put them into my car, and the difference it's made in their car and their daily driving has been immeasurable. And I can tell you the improvements I've seen in my Porsches, in my old Transit that I've got behind me, throwing them in the tank. It just feels, I don't know, it's almost like they come back to life again.
But it's like driving a car on a damp morning. Car's always really quick.
Really good, because you get that extra boost of oxygen.
You do. But the pellets, I mean, the reason they work so well in modern cars, especially, is you've got injector deposits, and it's taking the deposits off the injectors so that you're restoring the spray pattern, and obviously by removing carbon from the cylinders and all over the engine, it allows the ECU to restore the timing settings or advance the timing settings back to where they were.
So the ECU being the electronic computer or control unit of any car, it's the brain of your car. So most of those are intelligent. They can adapt and change to how your car or your engine's performing. And once they get these in the tank, they realise the engine's being cleaned up, the ECU adjusts, your car gets better.
The main thing with the ECU is the injector deposits. Well, it'll get wrong information. It'll get wrong information from the sensors, the air sensors and bits and pieces. But when you remove carbon from an engine, you get a reduction in temperature. That's key.
The only other way to remove carbon from an engine, other than using these simple things, is to pull the engine apart. Another abbreviation which you need to expose for me, ORI.
I think ORI is the big key with this. It's the key to the false claims and it's the key to the truth about the pellet. So ORI stands for octane requirement increase. And octane requirement increase is something that happens as a result of deposits building up in engines. It was discovered, it's well over 100 years ago that they termed it octane requirement increase. So as deposits build up in the engine, the temperature will increase, and that's why you get sort of erratic, get engine knock, erratic driving, pinking, all this sort of stuff. And we had to have lead in fuel to boost the octane to try and prevent or mitigate for octane requirement increase. When you don't have any deposits in the engine just behaves like it did when it came off the production line.
Right, so that's why we had lead in the fuel, because of pinking and knocking. Anyone who knows their motoring history would know that. That's why we put it in. It quieted the engines down, it improved octane, it boosted it, so the engine burnt better. It eliminated the knock-in, but then we had, obviously, the scientists say that was bad. Putting lead in fuel is a bad thing. Driving it past a school is not good for the environment. So they developed unleaded fuel, but then you've got carbon deposits building up. That's not going to eliminate the carbon deposits. The benefit of having lead is no longer there. That's why we have these days, that's why you can go to a petrol station, and if you're rich enough, you can pay 10, 15p more a litre of fuel to go and get your super unleaded, your super boosty 199 octane fuel, because that will burn better and burn brighter. But with these simple little things, you don't need to worry about any of that.
You won't get carbon. I mean, I think the expensive fuels, there are a couple of anomalies. People think if they get more octane in their fuel, they'll go faster. They won't. The average car won't. It won't affect the average car. It's the detergents that they put in the more expensive fuels that a motorist with a normal car would notice, because the detergent's removing some of the deposits from the injector nozzles. And that's really what's doing it. It's clever marketing by the fuel companies.
Yeah, it's very clever, isn't it? They'd do anything to get our money, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
Simon, they will literally do anything to get our money. So in terms of what I can put this in, I can put this in a petrol, a diesel vehicle, I can put it in a motorbike, a motorhome, a caravan, a selection of the vehicles that are kind of behind us. We can put it in anything.
Bikes, boats, jet skis, anything.
Doesn't matter.
No, not at all. Everything has, nowadays, everything especially has injectors. And we want to prevent injector deposits, because injector deposits cause dodgy information to go back to the ECU, increase temperatures, from the carbon deposits, etc. So we can just use them in anything, and we just keep the engine permanently clean. That's all they're going to do.
So who are the customers? Who are taking these? Because obviously we've got people out there that have been writing to me, write to you, tell us about the improvements, but more in a commercial use. There's lots of other customers, aren't there?
One of our biggest groups of customers would be the agricultural community, farmers, agricultural contractors. We sell loads, and we export to Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, and Europe, obviously. Loads of customers in Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and loads of customers in Scotland. Plant hire companies, classic car collectors, general car collectors, haulage companies, air conditioning companies. Everyone buys them that wants their car to run the way that it did when it came off the assembly line.
All I've seen are people saying, wow, that worked. Can I get another bunch, please? I want to put them in another vehicle. Yeah, they are quite incredible, aren't they, these little weenies, simple little things.
These make cars run with completely clean engines. That's what they do. And the fuel becomes the hero. So, it doesn't matter whether you're filling up at your local supermarket or you're filling up at the petrol station, you're spending lots of money on your fuel, or as little as you can. These will make that fuel clean your engine out. So if you've got deposits, it'll just clean it all out. If you haven't, it keeps it clean.
Emissions analytics. We've got some data out there. You've got actually people doing some real world testing in cars. Explain that.
So emissions analytics are probably considered to be the world leaders in real world emissions testing, which is the PEMS testing, portable emissions testing. And they've tested on a couple of cars for us. They've tested on one of their own cars, and they've tested on a VW Passat, a high mileage, high motorway car, a rep's car, a sales manager's car. They've done some tests on that.
And the results?
The results on the Passat were a 1.4% saving in fuel, which isn't really a saving, it's a restoration as a result of the removal of the deposits. And we know the deposits were removed in the Passat because the carbon monoxide dropped by 28%.
That's a massive number, isn't it? When you're thinking that's one vehicle.
One vehicle.
So how many vehicles on the planet?
1.5 billion. petrol and diesel.
See, that's shocking, isn't it? 1.5 billion. So
Huge
if you was to take that formula and apply it to the 1.5 billion vehicles out there,
lots of them would be massively affected because they're lorries and dirty old lorries chugging around. And we've got 1 million buses in Europe. I've got the stats written down somewhere for the UK, but in Europe there's 1 million buses, diesel-powered buses. So they'll all be producing raised emissions to some degree because of carbon deposits in their engine.
Yeah, so if you take that 28-30% reduction in deposits,
carbon monoxide.
If you take that and apply that across all those vehicles, the benefits to nations, capitals, nations, and countries is just immeasurable, isn't it?
Yeah,
quite astonishing. The sweet spot for these, I gather, is now, today, because we've just had European governments and our own government here in this country do a massive U-turn and push the requirement for electrification, kick the can down the road to 2035.
Yeah.
And I gather, and most analytics out there and experts will say, the next government are probably going to kick it down the road further on to probably 2040, and that might keep happening, which means that there are going to be more petrol and diesel cars sold out of our dealerships for a much longer period of time.
Yeah.
So these become even more important.
If the manufacturers fitted them, it would be very, very good for the environment, and it would, I think, it would signal the end of people, railing against petrol and diesel vehicles producing high emissions because they wouldn't produce excess emissions with the pellets.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it? When you think about it, it's a bit like when people say, my old phone, the battery starts to die exactly the same time when they produce a brand new phone. They start promoting. It's funny that, isn't it? And you're right, in terms of a car manufacturer, if he was to just install a plate in a petrol tank so it keeps the engine permanently clean, what happens at the dealer level when they they've got mechanics standing out the back with nothing to do?
Yeah.
They need to keep the system going, don't they? So, people do bring their cars into dealerships to decoke them. In fact, there's systems out there in place where it's quite aggressive, where you can take any car, a modern or an old classic car, to a facility where they pump a sort of a foam through the jacket of the car to remove all the deposits. It's really aggressive. Now, these days, there's a real demand on manufacturers to make sure that, their cars can be much more efficient. They can go more miles to the gallon. They can do better things. Plus, there's manufacturers now building cars to much finer tolerances, not like my old Mark III called Tina that was a bit rattly and a bit loose. These days, it's to a micron that the cars are built. And that's important, isn't it?
It is important. It's important. When you produce engines with those tight tolerances, the manufacturers take them to homologation testing, type approval, and they sail through. But in the real world, because the tolerances are so much tighter, carbon deposits will cause problems quicker, which is why over the last 15, 20 years, we've seen a resurgence in carbon cleaning franchises. All these people with the, hydrogen cleaning and all the O2 cleaning, all the different systems, foam cleaning, all of these things. Because modern engines are suffering once again, but this time because of tight tolerances. Yeah. So this
eliminates that.
It does. It completely prevents carbon deposits building up in the engine. So when you put the pellets in, you've got a new car with tight tolerances, high pressure turbo, high pressure injection system. You're just not going to get the deposits. So therefore, you're not going to get the flashing check engine light when you get the build-up of deposits, and you're not going to have the problems.
Now, people may say, okay, well, this all sounds good, but, it's going to cost me to put these into my tank. We are, at the moment, having a bit of a crisis in terms of the economy. People are paying more for their energy, both not only for their petrol, but for their gas and their electricity at home. But I suppose the flip side of that, when you think about it, it means that there'll be cash saving because they won't be going to their garage to get their engines decoked or tidied up.
Sure. I mean, there's two ways they're saving. Firstly, they're saving in the fact that their engine isn't getting carbon deposits, as you say. They're not getting the clogged up because the engine is running clean and efficiently. It's not leaving loads of hydrocarbon emissions through the exhaust system, which is they're just going to carbonise, clog the DPF, clog the EGR valve, bung up the cat. They're not going to have those problems, which is going to save them a lot of money, a lot of heartache, and they'll be using the right amount of fuel for the vehicle because the engine's completely clean and efficient. So yeah, it's an absolute cash saving if you keep your engine permanently clean.
So Simon, within an engine, there are deposits everywhere, aren't there? We've got exhaust emissions coming out, we've got deposits being left behind after the fuel's burned in the engine, which becomes soot basically, and that's carbon that gets built up. But there's deposits in injectors as well. There's deposits everywhere. Yeah. And these eliminate all deposits.
All deposits from the engine, absolutely everything.
But there's an important one, injector.
The Society of Automotive Engineers in America have said tiny amounts of residual fuel that's left in and on the injector, and the heat that's left in the engine when the engine's turned off bakes that on to the injectors, and it just becomes carbonised and baked onto the injectors. So all the tests that have been conducted by members of the Society of Automotive Engineers have all found the same thing, that there's a reduction in economy and performance as a result of injector deposits. But with these, the fuel's the hero. It cleans everything out, so you just don't get it.
Actually, I've proved this in all the programming I've been doing over the past 26 years. I've actually proved that time and time again. How many times have I taken a car that you've seen physically on television? I've taken the car to a rolling road, put it on a rolling road. The manufacturer states, that Porsche, they stated it should have 190 horsepower, goes on a rolling road, and after 100,000 miles, that car's down to 172 horsepower. Yep. But over time, you can see a degradation in power and performance out of an engine, out of every engine.
You've heard people say, "Oh, I'm sure I used to get better economy from this. I'm sure I'm filling this up more often," or "It's a bit gutless going up hills."
It's your phone battery running out when there's a new one.
Absolutely.
It's exactly that, isn't it? It is exactly that.
Carbon deposits are just a money spinner. So when we sell a lot to people with horse trailer lorries, camper vans, obviously vans and lorries, but especially camper vans, because they're sedately driven, the carbon builds up in them, Ducatos and things like that. Carbon builds up in them, and they become gutless going up a hill. If your car's rubbish up a hill, it's because it's got loads of deposits in it. Either that, you've got 6 bags of cement in the boot. But there's a lady that came to our company, bought some pellets. We didn't come to the company, she bought some pellets. And she tested them in her Mini Cooper, automatic. She went and tested it on a rolling road, tested it before, 116 brake, pellets, I think it was 800,000 miles with the pellets in. She's getting 119 brake. The performance, the acceleration of the car obviously improved, and the economy improved. It became quieter and smoother to drive, and as automatic drivers all say, especially Mini drivers, less clunky when they use the pellets. The gear change is much, much smoother. The automatic box just changes smoother. No carbon deposits. Carbon deposits are a nightmare. They cause problems in everything. The emission certificates we get sent in by customers all the time who've had a very close call, like, guys that very close call with the emissions at the MOT, and then they've gone and stuck the pellets in. Someone's told them about the pellets, and they've stuck the pellets in. The next MOT, there's been a massive reduction. And everyone in the industry knows that you measure how much carbon's been removed from the engine just by measuring the emissions. Or you can go on a rolling road, it'll still give you the same indicator. But always with us, people are sending in emission certificates and saying, like, I bought these, I heard about these, or I tested these, or I wanted to see if I could catch you out. Like the lady that tested them in the Mini, let's see what will happen. So yeah, that's it. You can put them in anything and see a reduction in before and after emissions. As long as there's carbon in the engine, obviously you put them in a clean engine and test it, you're not going to see anything. You won't see an improvement in power, you won't see an improvement in economy, you won't see a reduction in emissions. It's a brand new engine. People know that, obviously. These never wear out. That's the amazing thing. That's why the motor industry and the additive companies especially can't stand them. Because unlike liquid fuel additives that you've got to keep adding every month or 2 or 3 months, with these, you put them in, they'll work forever. Because it's the fuel that reacts from the surface of these. It's not these. These are non-sacrificial, Mike. So we never have to replace them.
And that's the bit, I suppose, that people just can't wrap their head around. Like me, when you first come to me with this, I was a complete skeptic. I was going, no, I can't. I can't believe this is rubbish. But then I proved it, and I see it with my own eyes. I'm like, man, how does that work? I mean, it is just so simple, isn't it? It really is that simple. You just throw it in the tank.
Yeah, the fuel reacts against the surface of the pellet. The pellet never wears out. And unfortunately for the pellets, really, for the history of the pellets, it sounds too good to be true. Couple that with the stupid false claims that have been made by sellers, pellet sellers, that have claimed about octane boosting and huge MPG improvements, which are all nonsense, as we know. That's why the pellets, people just that can't work. That can't work. I mean, you've seen the statistics, you've seen all the bits and pieces, the test data. You've spoken to Nick at Emissions Analytics with us and all sorts of people, and all the guys that you've recommended them to, and various customers that we've got. And they work. Yeah,
and what I love about you and your company is the fact that it's not as if you're saying to people, you've got to buy a handful of these and replace them every few years, which other people would do. You're not saying, you've never said that. You said, look, put these in your tank, it'll last forever. That's it, just throw them in. So it's not as if you're looking for a repeat custom off the same customer. You're just happy to get people, added them to their car once, that's enough.
If we get customers that put them in, fit and forget, it's really, really simple. They'll always recommend them to other people, and that's a really, really big thing.
FTC, that's why I put my name behind them. Fantastic.